I do encourage you guys to look at table 2-2 in as of April 2024. Or a detection of some of these parameters. Probably the most critical change in EDWM is the COA 3, course of action 3, and that is if there is a detection of TPH or any fuel or J5 petroleum indicator compounds. And this kind of goes into a deeper analysis that we are calling Tier 1 and Tier 2, where the Navy will then use gas chromatogram and mass spectrometry to get a deeper dive evaluation of the peaks to determine if this detection is actually associated to J5 or fuels. And then it will also perform additional qualitative evaluations of the petroleum hydrocarbons through a forensic laboratory to get an even more deeper dive and understand what are these constituents. So as far as detections, there have been 4 detections since the beginning of the sampling period for EDWM. These 4 detections of TPH occurred on May 29th, and it was at a hydrant. The Navy did notify EPA, and they did provide a technical memo summarizing their investigations, going through this tiered system, the Tier 1 and Tier 2. For this first detection, they determined that it was not due to petroleum hydrocarbons, that it was due to isopropyl alcohol contamination as part of the disinfection of the hydrant. The second detection was also from a sample collected on May 29th. That was again at a hydrant, and this similarly went through the tiered investigation, and the chromatograph evidence showed that this was primarily due to a lubricating type oil that was not associated to JP5 petroleums. So the third detection was on May 28th, and this one was at a residence in Zone D2. This was a TPHO detection only, so the oil range. And similarly, they went through the tier system and they resampled again on June 3rd and found that this was also attributed to a lubricating oil that was not related to JP5 or petroleum fuel. The fourth detection happened more recently in July. The sample date was July 11th. This was also at a resident in Zone D3. This one is undergoing the detailed analysis. Right now, we just got the notification earlier this week when the Navy received the results. So it will go similarly through the tiered system. We are planning on reviewing more detailed all of these samples that were collected in the first period from April through June of 2024 with the Navy by the end of the month, and kind of make sure that we agree on their analysis and results. Another important thing to note, on the third detection that occurred on May 28th at the residence in Zone D2, EPA did collect a split sample for that one area. So we are undergoing our own independent analysis. We do not have the results yet, but we are expecting them in August. And I hope that in the next meeting we are able to kind of provide a side-by-side comparison to kind of show you what is the Navy's results versus what is the EPA's laboratory results. I think that is the first question, more on kind of the updates of EDWM. I believe that there was another question on how are we improving the data collection. So part of that is the EPA split samples. We are committed to performing independent split samples during the extended drinking water monitoring. And the Navy does collect samples for us and sends it over to the EPA certified laboratory in Corvallis, Oregon, and also a subcontract lab that is located in Fresno, California. So just a summary of the split samples collected so far. EPA has collected 122 split samples that started in April of 2024 of this year, and we have received the final results for 69 of those samples from April 24th through June 10th from the EPA subcontract laboratory. We are still, and the results are mostly from SPOCs, and there have been some detections that we have seen, primarily in naphthalene and 1-methyl-naphthalene into methyl-naphthalene. And we are working on creating a dashboard so that we can publish all of our results over for public review. We are still awaiting some of the results though, primarily from our Corvallis lab in EPA. So those are the volatile organic compounds, the TPHs, total organic carbons, to name a few. And we are hoping to get all of those results available for us in August as well. So in addition to performing split sampling, EPA is also exploring an auditing of the Navy sample collection procedure, because again, as part of this sample, the Navy is still collecting these samples for us. So we are looking into conducting an audit of their sampling and sending out experts to make sure that the process is following what we believe are standard methods and also what we have agreed to in the EDWM, and providing another layer of assurance to make sure that the data that is being collected and reported is accurate. So that is kind of what I wanted to share with you today. Are there any questions?
Warren, can you unmute?
I can actually.
Unset. Alright, there are a lot of questions, Claudia. This is going to be a challenge. Okay. You have one? You have questions? Sure. Okay, so Claudia, you can't hear us at all using the mic. Okay, we're going to start with Walter, and then we'll go to Lacey, and Melanie, and then let me know if there anybody online who wants that question.
All right, so I mentioned earlier, in the last 3 years, we've been taking a lot of water samples. And the primary purpose of these water samples, as far as the Navy and EPA is concerned, is to make sure that the water does not contain a P5 or later on petroleum products. In the meantime, people are getting sick, people that don't have drinking water, and we're still messing around with taking water samples, trying to figure out how to do the analysis properly or how not to cross-contaminate them or whatever. The petroleum products, you're not looking out of this box, but stop looking for just petroleum, other possible contaminants that
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try. We are looking right now at just the JP5 and petroleum fuels. I think. Yes. Okay. Thank you. The table that we are looking at long-term monitoring. So long-term monitoring, they have another slew of parameters that may have not made it into EDWM because there was not a significant or any detections. For example, some of the metals that we were looking at before, those are no longer being part of EDWM because they were either not detected or not found to be significantly related to the incident. We are looking more closely at JP5 and petroleum fuels because that is related to our administrative consent order. So our administrative consent order does kind of focus in on the release that occurred on November 2021. So that is the focus of the EDWM, but we are looking more broadly at other parameters as well to make sure if there are any other issues of the water quality that we are targeting those as well. And some of the other COAs that are in the EDWM does kind of provide corrective actions if there are exceedances of some of these other water quality parameters, in addition to what the Navy is sampling for their regular compliance, which they are required to continue the regular compliance sampling to meet safe drinking water standards.
Mandy, do you want to ask her a question?
Yes. Can you hear me, Berkeley?
Yes.
Okay, I have 3 questions. First is sort of in this arena. What is it that you all and or the Navy are telling residents in these areas, whether they live in the housing area where you're getting positive hits from the fire hydrants, or from the residents' home themselves? How is it that you are notifying the individual resident, but then also the entire neighborhood that falls around the positive hit? Is the only form of communication that with the entire neighborhood where these hits are coming up is, a website, or are the residents receiving notification from the housing office, from the Navy in the form of a letter? Are they getting a letter on their door? How are folks being notified that there are still detections of TPH in their neighborhood so that they can be vigilant with their water?
So I'm not sure if the entire neighborhood is being notified, but certainly if there is a detection in the resident is being notified through their water quality action team, in particular for residents, like the resident detection of TPH. They did go back to the home and conduct a second sample to kind of confirm the original results and compare those two. So the residents themselves, but that would be probably more of a question for the Navy to kind of understand if they are communicating broadly to the neighborhood. But they are doing a lot of those actions, as part of their efforts for their water quality action team.
Right, so it sounds like we're sort of looking at this problem set still 2.5 years later in a vacuum. Meaning, we're not looking at this as water as being fluid and that this water system is interconnected and that folks live in a duplex, for example, or a quadplex, or they live on the same street. And I still feel like, as an impacted person myself and my family who has been deeply impacted, and we're still impacted by this, I still feel like it's a bit unfair, and it doesn't speak to transparency when we are only notifying a single resident instead of potentially the street or the neighborhood that there are still positive detections for TPH. And again, it sounds like a broken record, but I'd like to highlight that we are still requesting transparency and that folks be notified so that they can be vigilant with their health and with their water. That's first. Second, this question is for Jamie. We received an email from you with some letters that came from the end of June, and I'd like to read and sort of ask a response. One thing that came to the Navy is, and I'll read it, it says, regarding the EPA's request for PFAS analysis of samples collected in February of 2024 from the retention line and collection drums that held fluids from the November 2021 release, Navy is unable to agree with conducting the requested evaluation. So you sent this to us, Jamie, and I greatly appreciate you doing that, but I'd like to know the follow-up. So you all, as the regulator, you make this request to the Navy, and then they say, we're unable to fulfill this request. And then, so what is the follow-up action? What have you all done since receiving this letter? Basically, the Navy denying to do what you've requested them to do. What actions have you taken as a follow-up to them failing to meet your request?
Great, yeah, no, thanks. That's a good follow-up question. I'm gonna hand over to Allison, who's working with that right now.
Hi, Mandy. So in that letter, we had made 3 requests of the Navy regarding PFAS, and these were requests we had previously made, and we were summarizing again in that letter. The first was increasing source water sampling, so the used.
Hey, Allison, not to cut you off, but I'd like you to address my specific question. I'm tracking, and we all have access to the letter, but this is the one where they refused to meet your request. So if you could just address this one, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure, I just wanted to provide a summary in case people hadn't had a chance to review the letter. But the Navy did address 2 of our requests of the 3 in the letter. One of the requests that they had not addressed was regarding sampling of the AFFF retention line fluids that we understood they collected in February 2024, as well as these frac tank samples. So after receiving the letter, we are following up with the Navy, both at the on-island level as well as the Carnegie-Ohanassian level, regarding what they might be able to do to address some sort of sampling of the samples that they should be able to analyze. So we're still following up on that request.
So to be clear, they did collect samples in February of 2024, and you all have not been given access to those? Is that the way I read this?
Yes, we had requested that they take samples from the AFFF retention line when we became aware in February in advance of our defueling completion inspection that we did in March, that there was still fluid remaining in the line, that they take samples and analyze those samples.
So but to be clear, they did take the samples and they have not provided that data to you all at this point, several months later. Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, if you could let us know, I mean, this has been going back and forth since early June, and how long do you think it is that you'll receive a response or be able to give us an update to the public?
Yeah, we are currently following up on this one unanswered request and hope to be able to provide an update the next time we speak.
Okay.
And just a quick clarification, Mandy, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
They have the samples, but they haven't, it's not like they have data, but they haven't shared, they don't have the data, they just have like the sample jars. So, we're trying to get them to test for it, which is a little bit more of a lengthy process, not just a matter of sharing data.
I imagine if they're not sharing it, it's for a reason, but that's my own personal opinion, and we're working this issue with them with the lack of transparency. But again, I'll move on. My last question is for Amy. It's been some time since we've been able to speak to you publicly. There was a bit of controversy with some statements that you made to us about our congressional delegation and their support of the CRI. You made some pretty bold statements in saying that they did not support the CRI. That obviously came out in the news, and the congressional delegation had a different take on that. Could you please clarify why it is that you told the CRI that, and sort of where we are now with the support from the delegation and where we are moving forward with the CRI in general?
I think you need to talk to the congressional delegation if you have questions about their thoughts and opinions. Thanks.
Yeah, no, certainly we have, but I would just like to get your feedback and for the public, obviously, since it did make public news, why it is that you said what you said, if you could just clarify.
I was trying to clarify that I did have conversations with the congressional staff, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and then could you provide an update with the CRI, where we stand with that, the consent order, updating the consent order, where the Navy is today?
And you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I can give that today. So we are in discussions with the Navy concerning the revisions of the order on consent. We will be releasing a statement tomorrow, but what I can share with the CRI members today is that the intentions of the parties are to replace the twice quarterly CRI meetings with one quarterly CRI meeting. This obligation will require continued input from the CRI. The Navy and the DLA will not be obligated to participate in the CRI until the ground rules are adopted, including the use of an EPA-provided facilitator to ensure productive meetings. Hawaii Department of Health will continue to be invited and the meetings will allow the CRI and the public, the opportunity to ask questions that are within the scope of the order on consent. In addition to the CRI meetings, we are trying to diversify the community engagement requirements, including requiring topic-specific webinars on topics that are relevant at the time, once a quarter. Also to ensure that Navy and DLA continue to have regular updates at neighborhood boards. And also just to have an annual community engagement plan to update things as they continue the work under the order on consent. Thanks.
Warren, can you unmute? Okay.
Thank you for that update, Amy. And we'll move now to Susan. Noting the time, we'll have to go quickly.
Okay, so we brought this up at the last CRI meeting. So you said, Claudia, the EPA is doing split samples and the Navy is collecting these samples for the EPA. How does the Navy decide which samples are going to be split? Do they, randomize it? I'm just a little concerned that they're in control of the split sample and what goes to the EPA.
Yeah, so some of these randomized, we don't know when we're collecting the samples, what the results are going to be. So kind of out of those 4 detections that we've had since beginning EDWN, we have collected a split sample for one of those. So again, it is randomized. We are not doing split samples for everything. We're aiming to hopefully get up to 5%. So for us to get 1 out of the 4, that we're pretty happy about that. And then this is the intent of that. We wanted to be able to get a select group and compare them to understand and make sure that when the Navy is doing their detailed analysis and determination, that we can do that as well with our own experts to compare. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to maybe present a little bit more deeper next time once we have those results back from that one split sample that we did collect, that there was a detection for.
Warren, can you unmute?
Thank you very much, Allison. Okay, I think we need to move on. Can we handle the question about explosions in 3 minutes? You wanted to say something? We can do a little bit of both. You want to ask a question first? Okay. Amy, Andrew, whoever's on deck for explosion questions. Thank you.
Okay, at the last CRI meeting, questions came up, comments were made about Red Hill and the 20 tanks that were up there, the possibility of explosion, fire, and a whole bunch of discussions regarding working inside tanks with hazardous atmospheres. So just briefly, to give you an idea, I spent 20 years working on shipboard tanks, fuel tanks, water tanks, sewage tanks, all kinds of different tanks. And so the importance of venting and degassing is really, really critical because that's what maintains the atmosphere safe where people can work. It also keeps the possibility of a fire explosion down to a minimum. So we had asked a couple questions, and I had asked a number of questions regarding venting, degassing, volumes, flow rates, and so on. Jamie tried to provide some answers regarding the conditions of the tank. So I'm at a point where I'm telling you that if we believe everything this Navy said on all the stuff that they're doing and based on looking at their closure tank procedures, and they are maintaining that atmosphere inside the tank so meeting all of the OSHA requirements just for them to allow people to go in and out. The possibility or the probability of an explosion in the tank is somewhat minimal. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. But if they maintain all of the conditions that they say they're doing, then hopefully it would be safe for all of the workers.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. I'll just echo some of those sentiments there too. Before any work would go inside of the tank, there needs to be a marine chemist who, Drew C's facility closure, US EPA Region 9. So yeah, before anyone goes inside of the tank, a marine chemist needs to certify the tank as gas-free, and so part of that gas-free certification looks at the flammable vapors that are inside the tank, and that's measured with something called the lower explosive limit, the LEL. And so the LEL is kind of the measurement of the minimum concentration of flammable vapors in the tank that you would need to have an explosion. So anything that's below the LEL means that the risk of explosion is very minimal. So Navy has this gas-free certification from a marine chemist. So we know that the atmosphere inside the tank is going to be well below the LEL. Also, the cleaning contractors who are working inside the tank are carrying air meters with them. There's constant fresh air being pumped into the tank, and that a number of the equipment that they're using is explosion-proof rated. So there's layers of precautions that are taken on to minimize that low risk of explosion. So I'll just generally say that this is kind of an area that's outside of EPA's area of expertise. Supplies fall something that's more of like the OSHA regard. So if there needs to be follow-up discussions or anything like that, I'd probably send you to OSHA for follow-up questions. But that's just, to my knowledge, the risk of explosion.
Okay, I don't have a question. I just want to clarify a few things. So first of all, we have to take your word for it. We have to take Jamie's word for it. Notice that the Navy is not here, and they weren't there at the last CRI meeting when people had questions and concerns. And the reason for the CRI is so that we would be able to ask questions, raise concerns, and hear directly from a person's mouth what exactly they're doing to protect us, protect the workers, and protect our environment. So I appreciate you taking the effort, and I appreciate Jamie talking to the Navy and trying to get us an answer. And the concerns we raised on the OSHA standards being violated, again, the Navy's not here to explain to us. We did file a complaint based on Jamie's referral, so in order to support his referral, we submitted a referral of our own. We heard from the OSHA area director the other day that he says the information is too vague, it's not first-hand, and so he's not willing to do anything else. Again, the reason is vague. I don't have the Navy here to explain what they're doing. We don't have any first-hand information because the first-hand people are missing. So again, when we sit here and talk about all these things we want the CRI and the Navy to do, here's the bottom line. The community is not able to talk to people, to ask questions, raise concerns, and get credible answers for them.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. We're going to have to move as quickly as possible, and maybe have to stop the management to let us stay a little bit late. So we're going to move to the Restoration Advisory Board. Kyle, if you would like to, you can sit there or stand here, whichever you appreciate. Okay. All right, and for people who are in the room, there are materials on the table in the back that we got from the Restoration Advisory Board. And Kyle Kajihiro is a member of the Restoration Advisory Board for Pearl Harbor. And are you ready? Take it away.
Well, my couple, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I want to just say that I'm not speaking for the RAB, the Restoration Advisory Board. I'm just an individual member, a lay person. So, a little bit of background about this. The Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, which otherwise known as the Superfund Law, in 1980 created a mechanism, a process for addressing contamination. And the military adopted its own rules in order to address this process. So under 32 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 202, it outlines the rules that govern the Restoration Advisory Board. This came about because community advocates were pushing for more engagement, more oversight, and to be able to speak directly to the horse and get the answers. And they actually wanted citizen oversight, some kind of authority to actually impact the decision. What came out was this Restoration Advisory Board mechanism, which is advisory. It's co-chaired by the Navy or by the military branch and by a community co-chair that's elected. And there's a charter that sort of outlines the structure, the rights and responsibilities, the procedures for governing the RAB, the Restoration Advisory Board. So under the Defense Environmental Restoration Program, they have some sub-programs, Installation Restoration Program, IRP, which governs active bases that have cleanup sites. The Military Munitions Response Program, MMRP, which governs munition sites. And the formerly used defense sites, FUDs, which are formerly used military lands that are not transferred out of military jurisdiction. And that program is run by the Army Corps of Engineers. So they all sort of fall under this general overview, but they have some differences between them. The Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam Restoration Advisory Board has been around since, I don't remember the exact origin, but it's like late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I joined it around 2001 or 2 or something like that. Henry Curtis has been on it since the very beginning, I believe, and he's the community co-chair right now. So if you want more history about the RAB, I would ask him. There used to be 2 RABs for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. Hickam had its own under the Air Force, and the Navy did the Pearl Harbor one. But after the bases were combined, they created a joint RAB. And I would say that the Air Force RAB was much more transparent and creative in their responses. And they were willing to take us on site visits. They would employ creative techniques of remediation. The Navy has had a much more close culture about their process. So some of the frustrations that you all are dealing with, it sounds very familiar to us. At the last RAB meeting, we hadn't had one since I think 2001 or 2, so it's been a few years. COVID was part of it. Usually it should be quarterly, or at least a couple times a year, but we haven't had one in a few years. So at the last meeting, something that would be of interest to this body is we actually have the report on the PFAS investigation. So they are doing a study of PFAS at 2 sites near the Red Hill tanks. One near the spill site, which is the added 6, called Area A, and another one at the lower entrance where the oily waste disposal pit is, where they also have found some PFAS in water samples there. So those are the 2 sites where they're doing more intensive investigation. They're at a phase what's called, and under the RAB, they follow this process of preliminary assessment, site inspection, PASI, remedial investigation, and feasibility study. So they're at the phase of doing the RI, the remedial investigation. So they're doing drilling to put in more wells, they're doing soil sampling, and then they're trying to figure out what they can do about this contaminant, where it is, how much is there, and what they can do. The feasibility study is where they start figuring out what it's going to cost, and they start making some cost-benefit analysis. It's always been frustrating from a personal perspective that the risk assessment always leans towards cost efficiency as opposed to a more comprehensive response. And so we've always pushed for precautionary principle, at least I have, but that's not what they're required to do. So, let's see. The other thing that would be of interest to Kapilina residents is there's a military munitions response site just offshore here. And if you look to the beach, you'll see the signs that say, watch out for unexploded ordnance in the waters. We did a site visit after the RAB meeting and visited these signs. And that's the remedy. It's considered an institutional control. And so by putting up a sign, you're warning people, and so it lowers the risk calculus. We asked why they didn't remove this stuff. They said it's too old, and a lot of it has been grown over with coral and other things, like corny algae and stuff. And so it would be more damaging to try to remove it than to let it sit there and just keep people away from it. So that's what we have offshore here, folks. Let's see. There's possibly. I mean, but it is. You know, these are like World War II era munitions. They're cemented into the reef at this point. So they become part of the structure of the reef, and so it'd be really hard to get rid of it. This is a problem out in Iulai as well. Off Ordnance Reef, the sewage treatment plant. Yeah, those are some of the signs.
Find the list.
Yeah, they're all along the beaches there now. And so this constitutes a form of remediation, institutional controls. So,
Just to clarify, so there are old bombs that are on the reef right out here in the water, and if we touch them, they could explode on us. So don't touch them, and the only way you can know not to touch them is because you entered the water by one of these signs, which you actually read and registered that there are bombs in the reef.
Well, I don't know if they're doing any kind of canvassing of the neighborhood, but they ought to. I think they do have restrictions. The other problem right now is that they've closed down the marina and stuff because there's an invasive coral that has infested the marina and parts of Pearl Harbor. And so they don't want any fishing, any kind of activity that could spread it. So that's the other thing. They're keeping people away from the groins, the rock walls and stuff, because and no fishing is allowed and all of this. So there's a lot of problems.
So these old bombs that are in the reef now, are they leaching? Are we monitoring to make sure that they are not leaching?
They possibly are leaking. We don't know exactly what they're doing. In Waianae, what's happening with the ordinance is it breaks down in the water, and like the pellets of nitrocellulose wash up on the beach. So these are the propellants that shoot the munitions. I guess they eventually break down in the environment, but they don't have a very active response to these chemicals. There's a long list of sites. So they handed out this at the meeting. If you went to the meeting, it's like double-sided. They have hundreds of individual sites within Pearl Harbor alone. So the Pearl Harbor complex constitutes one of the largest Superfund sites, national priorities list. There's hundreds of individual contaminated sites within it. The RAB will listen to maybe 3 or 4 reports every meeting on different sites on the progress clinically. And it's everything from heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, lead, to perchloroethylene solvents, things like that. We do have jurisdiction over some petroleum. So there's the giant fuel slick under the main base at Pearl Harbor. But the other thing to keep in mind is CERCLA does not cover petroleum products. That's why Red Hill is not under our jurisdiction here. It's only by kind of a special exception that they included these other petroleum sites. So what else is under our thing? There are, the PFAS will fall under the RAB jurisdiction as a Superfund chemical. And because the regulations are just being developed right now, it may change in terms of what the required response is. So that's kind of where it's at. And we have seats open for community members who are interested. So it's about as frustrating or maybe more so than your classes here, right, but they do have to attend because it is written into the code, right? It is the agenda is jointly developed between the community and the military co-chair. We can request for particular things to be added to the agenda, and Henry's usually pretty amenable to community requests. We can also request these site visits. So if this is something that people are interested in, I would recommend contacting Henry Curtis, the community co-chair, and putting your name in the hat. And I think the community members vote on who is elected.
Do you have a timeline for that? When should people decide whether to apply?
Well, I would say contact him as soon as you are able. We're looking at maybe meeting quarterly again, but schedule hasn't been set yet.
Do you have his email address memorized?
I don't, but I can get it to you, Chairman.
Okay. I think what we'll do is on the CRI website, we will post information about the RAD. If anyone is interested in applying, they can go through that portal. Thank you.
I have requested, they used to post the minutes and the reports on a website. After September 11, they took it all down. And so I asked them again if they would put those up because people need to see the minutes to be able to track, the discussions. These reports, the briefing sheets are important for understanding what's going on. And then the technical reports are in the library. So I think Pearl City Library is one of the repositories. Hamilton Library at UH 101 is another one. So if you want to dive into that stuff, it will be there. You can,
Could you say a little bit about how the choice the Navy has taken for how to manage RAD sites has affected people's use of the environment? Fishing, swimming, diving, eating the food that they catch?
I think they do their process to compliance, not necessarily to what's safe or from a community standpoint. The common sense thing is like, is it safe? Can we drink it? Can we eat it? Can we play in it? And I don't think that that's necessarily the standard that they're using. So if they put up a fence and a sign that says don't go here, that counts as a control that lowers the risk calculus, right? And so this is part of the problem. We have sites like across from IDEA Elementary School where there's diesel and perfluoroethylene in the groundwater. It's not an aquifer that's being used for drinking water. So they're saying, okay, there's no pathway for that contamination. And even though contaminants are being detected in the IDEA Bay, they're saying that no one's drinking that water, no one's supposed to be fishing because there's scientists that don't need to fish. So therefore, it's compliant. There's no pathway for contamination, and their remediation method is a monitored natural attenuation, and that counts as a remedy.
Can you please decipher what is natural attenuation?
To watch it and don't do anything. Let nature take its course. So this counts as a remedy if you have these things in place. This is what the problem is, that it's not an active and comprehensive kind of response to the problem.
And it's undermining people's ability to feed themselves and drink the water from the environment.
Exactly. I think there's a hand.
Okay. Melody first and then Mandy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kyle. We just heard from Board of Water Supply that the IDEA well has polynuclear hydrocarbons. And you're just saying that there is this sitting there in IDEA. This pond. Yeah, okay.
Well, okay, so
Is there a real, some
I think
kind of connection?
I don't know. I'm not a hydrologist or anything like that. But what they explained to us is that where the spill occurred in that area is across from the elementary school, and it's a different aquifer. It's like a cap rock aquifer as opposed to the basal lens or whatever. So it's not being pumped for drinking water. But they are finding that diesel and perfluoroethylene is migrating out into IDEA Bay. So they found detections in the bay.
Okay, then I have another question too, because I'm surprised that you said that the Superfund in Pearl Harbor is not covering petroleum.
Right.
I mean, that's what's in there. That's
Well,
That's the.
yeah, so there's, I don't know the origin of that, but when the Superfund law was passed, petroleum products were not included as regulated substances. So it's covered under, I think under RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and some other rules.
Some other rule.
They include some of the petroleum contamination at Pearl Harbor in our jurisdiction by just sort of practice, but they're not necessarily required to under CERCLA and the Superfund laws.
Thank you.
Two quick things. I have to be careful because everyone knows I'm still active duty, so public testimony when it comes to this subject is a bit limited for me. However, I would like to highlight that this is the same organization, the Department of Defense, was trying to convince this community during their net leases. So I'd like to highlight that. I'll just leave that there. The second thing is, thank you so much, Kyle, for being here. I'm not familiar with the RAB, I've not attended these meetings, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear that the folks who attend these meetings are members of the community of the RAB and then also members of the Navy. Did I hear you correctly?
So the Navy has a co-chair, and then they have staff that participate.
Oh, I can't hear you, it's muted.
Sorry,
Oren, can you hear me?
one second.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so the Navy has a co-chair, and then they have their staff, the engineers staff, the environmental staff that do the reports, the technical reports. They're not voting members of the RAB. It's only the community folks that actually vote on things. We don't actually have decision-making power, so there's very few things that we actually do vote on. They also have a list of other technical members. So EPA used to have people that attended, Department of Health, DLNR, and then there's invitations go out to elected officials in the community, other groups like that. So people can attend, it's open to the public, but who gets on the list of the RAB is who we vote in. That's for community members only.
Yeah, I said in all the years that you all have had these meetings, they're obviously very emotionally driven and tough conversations, I imagine, that are being had in these meetings about the water. Has the Navy ever refused to participate in these meetings because of the lack of a government facilitator that runs these meetings?
No, they're required to have these meetings. But there are cases, I think in Fort Bragg or some other sites where they had RABs that were quite contentious, where the Navy then dissolved the RAB. They said it was not progressing and they dissolved it. So yeah, so that's a precedent that might be playing out here with the CRI. But in our case, they've participated in the meetings, they're required to under their rules. Whether it's satisfactory in terms